Hello, today we will be discussing Awaken to Love, Chapter 2. We are revisiting Chapter 2, and we are here like 8 people, 8 participants showed up. You can only see a few of us, and let's take a moment, look through the book, raise your hand to start the discussion. And I'm going to start on this: mind and brain are not separate. The author says, I'm reading what she says, the unconditioned mind is simply open awareness. But even before that, she says there's an interplay between mind and body. Mind, brain, and body. They coalesce into a singular, interconnected system. We are not merely minds housed in bodies, but rather integrated body minds. However, the unconditioned mind is simply open awareness. And here, what is special about the unconditioned mind is the quality of emptiness. But the mind continuously generates a spectrum of thoughts, feelings, images, sensations, and states of being, leading to gradual conditioning and obscuring of our innate unconditioned nature. Wow. So our awareness, this is quality of emptiness and void. I never thought about it before in this way. It's only the conditioning that covers that up. And then she talks on the following page, she talks about deep sleep, where we lose awareness. We lose awareness of our existence and experience nothing. This state is called sushupti in Vedic traditions, where the mind contracts to a near non-existent state. Okay, now you have the contraction when you sleep. But then what about what happens when there's an expansion? The highest state or transcendent consciousness, it is called this super aware state. It's called samadhi. Yes, Paul.
Yeah, well, there's 2 questions. I have an overall question. If anybody you can just answer at some point, not necessarily now, but where does ego in? Because she mentions ego. So this is not relevant to what you just said, but ego. Why does that fall in terms of that? Must be a system of parts.
Yeah.
But what she's saying there, that is, I mean, because I practice a lot of meditation, and that's part of, you know, calm light spirituality is detaching in order to become empty of our daily stuff, because we get trapped into or not trapped, trapped. We can get so caught up in the daily whatever that we lose touch what she's saying there. So I think my practice of meditation over time, I am familiar with the emptying and I've never thought of it in terms of unconditioned mind. I think of it in terms of quiet, where you get to that place where there's just contemplation, you're just quiet. But that is practice. I've been practicing meditation since I was about 19, so I've had a few years to be familiar with all this stuff. So yeah. And I love when she said the mind is a process, not that it's obviously it is. We learn, and I think what one thing that comes to mind is having a beginner's mind. In other words, that freshness rather than a static, I know everything now, this is my mind, it's full. And so, yeah, but that she didn't mention that there, but yeah, beginner's mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Marlene, just one little second. Just to,
Sure.
yeah. So it looks like this kind of awareness when we sleep or when we're hyper aware, super aware, the mind dissolves. There's a void. Okay, like when you sleep, you're not aware. It feels like a void. What happened to the awareness? It's still kind of there. She talks later about the awareness being like a kind of the consciousness being the screen and the movie playing on the screen. They are together and separate. But so the same happens when you're very aware, when you are like into the state of self and expansive. Yeah, it is. But the ego is more, I'm guessing what you're saying, Paul, talking about what happens to the ego. The ego is a conditioned mind. Like, our identity, what people believe of us. Yeah. I'm complete. Marlene?
Yes, I was thinking about that too, the ego. The ego seems to be limited in that it wants to be superior, but it doesn't reach into the unconscious. It's almost contemptuous of the unconscious. It says here, the ego boldly staked its claim in the tiny island of the conscious realm. And that's what you just said, Vana. It's in the conscious realm, it's day-to-day activity. However, it believes that it's superior to the unconscious because the unconscious is too untamed, and it wants dominance over the unconscious. So it's not a friendly partner. And this is something, it says, that is known as imperialism of the ego. So ego wants to be king.
Yes.
And then it's, it wants to be in charge. But the ego's attempts to assert control over the psyche, it's unable to do so. And yet it vigorously tries to manage the parts and burdens. But we have to get back to self. The ego is not the self.
Yes.
So interesting.
Yeah, so
Thank
interesting.
you. I'm
so
finished.
interesting. Great, thank you. Yes. So what you just said, Marlene, and the author, she talks about we kind of vilify our subconscious. It's where all the problems exist. If only we were just ego. And I also want you to draw your attention here. I liked that she talked about the concept of particle and wave Dick Swartz talks about. So she says here, self in particle form is intricately tied to the physical brain, as Swartz acknowledges. It needs a certain amount of hardware, brain capacity, to operate fully. The actionable leadership qualities of particle self, for example, persistence, perspective, etc., are not separate from our brain. So you can see those leadership qualities of self. They're actionable. And that's the particle form of the brain. But conversely, the waveform self transcends the need for neural circuitry. Wow. So the particle depends on the brain, but the waveform transcends that. It represents a bridge of awareness that connects us not only to each other, but also the universal self. It's very expansive. Okay. I will move through the book. Okay, so I'll flick through the pages. Is that okay? Okay. She talks here a little bit at the end of this little section about the attentional focus. Attentional focus lags brain functioning slightly because it needs extensive neural coordination. In neuroscience, mind emerges from the energetic material processes of the brain rather than preceding as an ethereal force. So the mind, you need that kind of functioning of the brain for the mind to manifest. Conscious mental focus requires time to construct, while unconscious neural activity supplies the underlying impetus. Okay, and the next session it is titled Conditioned versus Unconditioned Mind. And this is very, very interesting section. So I'm going to read a little bit here. Our deeply ingrained beliefs, values, and emotions can initially obscure our access to the unconditioned mind, a state of pure awareness. The unconditioned mind is the pure awareness. It is that state of sleep or transcending, a sense of transcending. Or how did she call it? If awareness expands tremendously, then awareness also dissolves. But what happens is because of beliefs, values, and emotions, then we are missing out on that sense of awareness. Or our pure awareness is not there anymore. And the common obstacles on this journey include clinging to suffering, constant busyness, the drive to intellectually grasp every experience, and the urge to extract meaning from all things. Well, there are loads and loads of obstacles. In Buddhism, experiencing the unconditioned mind is known as the ultimate remedy, a universally healing state that brings us closer to true liberation. This is interesting. But the unconditioned mind cannot directly eliminate fears, illnesses, or poverty, but resting in its boundless presence vastly reduces suffering. Although physical and mental conditions may persist, abiding in this unconditioned awareness brings profound peace and spiritual nourishment. And then we become less reactive to habits and cultivate increased capacity for freedom, love, and joy. Yeah, Marlene?
That reminds me of the practice of acceptance of others as they are, acceptance of yourself as you are, of the conditions, as in 12-step meetings, begin where you are. So you could be in dire poverty or be in a process of restoration where things aren't in place, things are chaotic, and yet still have an inner peace and a connection to others that provides nourishment and identification and belongingness. And to me, that's all part of the unconditioned mind, because the conditioning, it's really a sort of a domestication,
Yes.
where we get
Mhm.
overly busy, and the busier we are, the more we're running around like chickens with our heads cut off, the more we get praise. Oh, look at her, she's such a martyr. Like my mom was a martyr archetype, and she literally would run around quickly all over the place, almost with her right hand velcroed to her forehead, and go, "Oh, Andre, the children." you know. But my dad couldn't do anything because he was always working. He was not ever home. So, the children ran the show and mom went crazy. So she had no access to like an inner life or to a state of inner peace, because everything came from ego and from controlling and doing daily life. And to me, that's very limiting, and is a place of suffering,
Mhm.
because it's in the transcendental, in
Mhm.
transcending, that we also transcend that suffering of domestication. Anyway, thank you. I'm done.
Thank you. Yes, Mark.
Yeah, that previous paragraph right before conditioned versus unconditioned mind,
Mhm.
I I like that first sentence. Our deeply ingrained beliefs, values, and emotions can initially obscure our access to the unconditioned mind. That to me, that condition, that key word in that sentence is obscuring, the obscuring of the unconditioned mind, which is a state of pure awareness transcending the boundaries of our conditioning. And then resisting or struggling against our conditioned tendency reduces that access and prevents it. So when I've done meditation in the past, I sit there and I watch my mind, and then I get excited. I realize, oh, I'm trying, I'm trying to I'm implicitly struggling or trying to achieve something that I've read about, this pure awareness, this peacefulness, this empty mind. And when you just see that trying, then you realize, oh, that's awareness that's kind of seeing that trying, and then you let it go and say, oh, yeah, that's the conditioned mind, me wanting to be different, me wanting some solution. It was like Gracia posted that link to a there is no problem to solve. And when you're implicitly sitting there meditating, then you realize, oh, the reason that there's a hidden thoughts in here, like, oh, if I can just get this right, there's the problem of my life would be solved, things would be better. And then you see you see that, and it kind of disarms that conditioned mind. And then as you see that, your ego sneaks back in and says, oh, that's great, this is a great insight. And
Yeah.
that's like in the Hinduism, in the Bhagavad Gita, it says things about, the unconditioned mind doesn't go, oh, this is great, oh, that's terrible, oh, this is better than I was, I'm going to get even better yet. And you got this ambition to be better, and that's just the ego saying, oh my gosh, this is great. And then you see, oh, I'm doing it again, and then you get disappointed in yourself. There's a poem I memorized a couple lines from about the illumined mind. He is lucky and does not rejoice. He is unlucky and does not weep. And so on that next page, right? Oh, you can still see it on that. The
Okay.
next page, it talks about the reactive mind,
Yes.
and and so that's the reactive mind. And I always associate that too with the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. So you could rewrite that as the unconditioned mind, the pure awareness, the self with a capital S is my shepherd, and I shall not want is, to me, that doesn't mean, like some people interpret that 23rd Psalm as oh, everything's going to be great. God's going to make everything great for me. No, I see it as the wanting attitude. Like I shall not want means like I'm being kind of whiny inside. I've got some pleasure today and I had some great pleasure yesterday. I want to cling on to that. I've got a great new relationship. I'm worried if it's going to continue. I want to get better.
Okay.
All these things. That wanting attitude is I'm completely dependent on how things outside me are going. So I want to control those things and make things better. I want more power. I want more status. I want to be attractive again, like I was when I was in my 20s, compared to now at least, and stuff like that. That's the wanting attitude, and that's the source of dissatisfaction. So to me, the key thing is that word obscure. And then in the next sentence is the resisting or struggling to I'm struggling to achieve being self-led. I'm resisting these bad things that I'm trying to get rid of in myself, as opposed to just seeing and understanding them. And when you see with the unconditioned awareness, to me, that's like a light that dissolves the fog.
Yeah.
So you can see reality as it is. And then there's some sort of magical feeling like, oh my gosh, the source of happiness has been there all along. Trying to achieve it just prevents you from having happiness. So
Oh,
anyway,
wow. Yes. Wow. Very wise.
thanks.
I'm hearing Mark about like, where is the center? Is there judgment? Because if there's judgment and if there's fear, if we want things out of fear, if we criticize, oh, that's bad, that's good, I want that, I want to do better than the Joneses, then where all this striving comes from. But I would also guess that if it comes out of love for progress, love for learning, there's a different feeling. It's not the ego, but it feels different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
impose like I wrote down in many journals and notes, I would write down the 3-letter acronym V as in Vicky, J. And that was from something I learned in the 70s about how we impose value judgments on reality. And this is good, that is bad. And our conditioned mind, our society makes us, we're brought up to compare ourselves to others, to be in competition. We're brought up, the media wants us, and marketing wants us to, oh, you'll be happy if you have this. Oh my gosh, if you're dressed in these clothes, if you're driving this car, you will be so impressive to your neighbors and other people that see you. And so we're so concerned with comparing ourselves to others, and we think that security will be when we get some position and power, and then we fear not being important, not being
Yes.
noticed. And to me, that all of that's an ego thing.
Yes.
Krishnamurti had this idea of his that's somebody I did a lot of meditation based on in the 70s, and his idea was choiceless awareness. So choiceless
Oh,
awareness. And another one was the flame of attention. So when I'm just attending to and watching my thoughts, I tend to settle down and realize that there's an energy within me that stops getting burned up in just this constant stream of thoughts, and you start to feel some sort of insight and connectedness and maybe the 8 C's and all that stuff a little bit. So like that quote on their consciousness is the stuff of the cosmos. There's something sacred about consciousness when it's not distorted by ego. And ego is a lot of times based on, like we did that one book that was a study of shame, and fear and ambition and anger and all of those things, I think, are based on conditioning. Like a lot of the people that are in the MAGA movement in the United States, well, we're all filled with anger and to a certain extent, but I just see on social media, you can tell when a person is addicted to anger. And I feel so superior to those Puerto Ricans and those blacks, and women are not as great as males and the wonderful males of our species, and the people that just are patriarchal, sexist, racist, and think all the problems of our society are caused by this group that we, especially us white males, are so much better than. They're, and I'm right and you're wrong and you're stupid and I'm brilliant, and all these value judgments that we see, like Frank Anderson or somebody, like there's a couple books in the IFS movement about how society will be transformed when IFS principles are applied to society. And anyway,
Yeah.
that
And yeah, I kind of admire how the Dalai Lama, for example, managed to get into that space of self-energy without knowing IFS. Because I try to do this kind of meditation, Buddhist meditation, being non-judgmental and just being aware of thoughts passing by or parts or sensations or whatever. And it is difficult. It is challenging.
Yeah, and what you just said a key word that was one of the things that helped me the most when I was trying to work on this a lot, and that was the word trying. And I would sit down to do some meditation and contemplation, and when you just are watching your mind, it's like, oh, and then you see, I'm trying, and I'm sitting here expecting that in the next few minutes, or if I sit here long enough, something great's going to happen. And then you realize I'm trying.
Yes.
And there's nothing. Krishnamurti made me realize there's nothing I can do. It's my trying to do what will make me achieve what the Dalai Lama and the Buddha has. As soon as I see, that there's nothing I can do.
Yes.
And then you see yourself constantly, I'm trying to do. And pretty soon that thought is just revealed as a worthless pursuit, but you don't judge it. Oh, that's bad. Yeah. You just see it and understand it. And that's the idea of Krishnamurti's. And when you see that, then all of a sudden you start to feel like this magical release of anxiety and fear and pursuit. So when you see yourself trying, don't try to get rid of that so you can achieve something better.
Yes.
Because you go, if I'm trying to get rid of my trying, then that's just reinforcing the trying. That's tricking you to, like in that book we did, Jailbreak, that's tricking you into, I'm decorating my prison cell. Oh, as opposed to, let's get out of this prison of trying.
Yes.
Okay.
Very clever.
Thanks.
Great for picking that up. Yeah, brilliant. Anne?
Oh, I was gonna say I shared your like marvel that people could just get so like in self-energy like the Dalai Lama with meditation, but then since like learning more about it, I mean, they don't just do meditation in that sense. They do so many kinds of meditation. They're practicing like 10 hours a day of like noticing when something contracts in them, noticing all types of contraction, learning like dozens or even, more than that, different ways of relating to contraction. And so they are doing very detailed and varied work. It's not just what we've encountered of like, oh, notice what we're noticing and let it go. That's not like they're just doing that all day. They're learning a lot of stuff. And at the same time, I've heard other discussions about like, for people who are very traditional, like serious Dharma practitioners, like, well, if you do have a lot of psychological baggage, how important is it to do a psychological approach to releasing that before you can, quote, reach enlightenment? So they say, like be in constant self-energy, basically. And they say that, it really depends they don't know. Some problems clearly do require psychological treatment. Depends also on how people are actually practicing their meditation. You know, people can be practicing in a way that is very suffused with self-energy, and other people, depending on the depth of the trauma, the way that they practice meditation, all these things affect whether or not just a meditation approach can bring out self-energy with the same strength as IFS, and vice versa as well, right? Some people with purely a psychological approach, it's not enough for them and they really need a spiritual practice to supplement it.
Oh, wow. Thank you. That's brilliant. Yeah. And I guess doing some different types of meditation, like the silence meditation, doing that in a group with others would make it like, it wouldn't feel like a trying, but it's like we are in it together. And now I'm going to move on to this togetherness part of the section, okay? The consciousness. So this is a section on consciousness. And she says that, the author says, Laura, the concept of consciousness points to a profound interconnectedness with others, rooted in our relationships and shared experiences. The Latin origin of the word conscientia means knowledge shared with others. And also the term Ubuntu means I am because we are. Our sense of ourselves emerges through our interactions and bonds with others, challenging the view of the individual as a wholly autonomous entity. We come to understand ourselves through the mirrors others hold up to us. And the poet E.E. Cummings succinctly stated, I am, through you, so I. And I love also what William James said. He described us as islands in the sea, separate on the surface, but connected in the deep. So we're all islands, appearing separate, but connected. So there's also the concept of betweenness. Our consciousness and self-knowledge are inextricably shaped by our social and relational contexts, refuting the myth of the isolated individual. Also, trauma is relational, as I understand. That's what Frank Anderson says. So we are at our core interdependent beings, defined by the webs of connection that sustain us. Everything is composed of consciousness. Everything is a process or activity of consciousness. In psychology, consciousness refers to subjective mental experience, our awareness of self, thoughts, and surroundings. Now, here is something that I found it, I've heard it before, but still a little bit strange. So Laura says that panpsychism is a concept in the philosophy of mind, proposes that consciousness is the fundamental feature of all things in the universe. All activity, including matter, perceives and is conscious to varying degrees, from rocks to tadpoles to babies. Rocks have consciousness? Well, that's a philosophical idea, proposition, I'm not sure, but yes. And there is an explanation because of the electrons. Electrons possess a form of proto-consciousness or proto-mentality. So so I'm not, so consciousness, there's a difference, there are degrees of consciousness, Okay, this is a proto-consciousness, I guess, that rocks may exhibit. Uh, but and our consciousness that is relational. I'm not sure. It is, yeah. Marlene, anything to share here?
Yes, yes.
Me,
You
my
know, I
confusion.
love rocks. Geology and rocks are our earth. And to me, I can relate to the rocks having consciousness, but it's different than human consciousness. I had the grace to visit the Grand Canyon. I think it was in Arizona, wherever it was. It's in different states. And that vast crevice and expanse of reddish colored different layers of rock that go back millions of years. It is awesome. It is like I was transported into a whole other consciousness in the midst of these rocks. And so I had a sense of this rock formation being alive, just being alive, even though,
Yeah.
you know, in their incredible stillness, this incredible stillness of this majestic expanse, it's just so overwhelming. It's a whole different consciousness, and I
Yeah.
can't even explain it. It's like trying to explain smelling a rose. Seeing the Grand Canyon in person is, thank God, that's the best gift I ever got, if I never do anything
Yeah.
else.
That's in
Thank
my
you.
bucket list.
Thank you.
But I kind of get, we are made of mud kind of thing, So why not?
Sacred
Mud,
mud, sacred
yeah,
rocks.
non-organic material may, as well have a sense of, or whatever, this kind of thing, quality of consciousness.
We're made from stars.
We're made of stars. That's it. But here, she says here, consciousness by its very nature is not intentional, but it becomes intentional through the mind. The ego consciousness is thus a fragment of the self's consciousness, or in other words, it's reflected consciousness according to the mirror models in this philosophical tradition. So, yeah, when referring to the self as consciousness, the term is used differently from its general modern day use. So in our everyday language, when we talk about consciousness, this is different from the philosophical view. So when she talks about consciousness here, which is different to the modern day usage, consciousness refers to pure unconditioned consciousness, consciousness prior to intentional focus on this or that. And here's the trick. Consciousness exists beyond what current neuroscience can measure. McFadden believes the brain's electromagnetic field could be the substrate of consciousness. In my view, the author says in her view, the brain can be thought of as a receiver that tunes into the field of consciousness, which itself remains unaffected by physical changes to the brain. Just as a broken radio does not affect the underlying signal. So dreams demonstrate how a rich, seemingly external reality can arise entirely within our own minds, suggesting that the external world we perceive is also an expression of a larger consciousness, self, with the individual mind, yours and mine, acting as a filter and interpreter of that universal consciousness. Yeah. And there is this hard problem of consciousness, the difficulty in explaining why and how we have qualia. The qualia is the subjective first person qualitative, what it feels like aspects of conscious experience. Because our consciousness is, everyone's consciousness is different. And it's very difficult to measure what it feels like, what consciousness feels like. This is the qualia. You can't, it's very difficult to measure. And that's the hard problem of consciousness. And there's the soft problem is that we can explain all the functional and the physical processes involved in consciousness. But the hard problem of qualia remains. Okay, I will flick through the pages. Okay. Oh, I bookmarked this page here. Peter Fenwick believes that consciousness exists independently of the brain as an inherent property of the universe, like dark matter, dark energy, or gravity. Brain does not create consciousness, but filters it, as the eye filters the electromagnetic spectrum and the ear filters sound frequencies. Fenwick posits that our consciousness falsely perceives a duality of self and other when there is only unity, as we are an integral part of the universe. He suggests that upon death, we transcend the human experience of ego consciousness and its illusion of duality, merging with a universal consciousness. This is very deep. So it's only the brain that filters and gives us that illusion of duality. Across the non-dual philosophies popularized by many people, Vedanta, Klein, in the school of Kashmir Shaivism, the terms consciousness, awareness, and being refer to the same underlying reality. Okay. So it is the formless, invisible, noumenal, that's what noumenal means, formless and invisible reality, devoid of any phenomenal attributes. From this perspective, view as awareness, know all appearances, but are not composed of anything that appears. Awareness in this way can be thought of as empty or void, because it has no observable qualities, echoing the words of spiritual teacher Adyasanti. So it's centered on, consciousness. It is this void. Okay. And so if we think of awareness as void, but here she says on the next, further down, she says awareness is not actually separate from phenomena, just as a movie screen is not separate from the images appearing on it, or ocean waves are not separate from the ocean. There's no boundary where awareness ends and manifestations begin. Awareness and the world of appearances are inseparable, two sides of the same non-dual reality. Our finite individual consciousness likely emerges from a vaster collective consciousness. The emergence of mind from no mind is sheer magic, like what you said, Marlene, before. this magic element, this how can you know, how can there be consciousness in in the Grand Canyon? You mentioned something about feeling of magic or something like that.
It's a transcendent
Transcendent.
consciousness.
Yeah.
Yes. It's like that universal self.
It's like a miracle.
It is, yes.
Because
It's a phenomenon.
a phenomenon. But it's not science cannot. It's a hard problem. Science cannot explain it. Okay.
There's a sentence here. It says, the power of the divine ground. I think of it doesn't mean what I'm thinking it means, because I'm thinking of the Grand Canyon as the divine ground.
Yeah.
Because we're grounded to earth, to the rocks.
Mm-hmm.
But the rocks are fluid, they turn into fluid fire. Because inside the earth it's fire, and the rocks are molten fire. So it's very interesting. It's very
Yes.
transformative. So for me, there's divine in that.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Divine, as you said, divine, sacred. I think that's what you said, sacred, not magic.
Yes, sacred, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to duality. And there is something, there's a picture of the vase and the two faces, and I really like that. So she talks about reality here. She says reality has two fundamental, irreducible, yet deeply intertwined aspects or properties, the immanent and the transcendental. She terms this perspective duality, two-ness within oneness. And duality is the path of embodied non-duality. And there is an example, and I love that example, that perceptual illusion. One of the best ways of conveying the capacity to synthesize opposites is through perceptual illusions, as depicted in Figure 6. Notice how initially you may be alternating between the face and the vase, but eventually it's possible to blend the two into one unified gestalt. So here's the, can you see, guys, can you see both? Can you see the vase and the faces? I can now see both, which is strange. I can see the vase and I can see the faces at the same time. Because normally with illusions, you see one, not the other. But with this illusion, I can see both. Can you see that, Marlene? Can you perceive that, yeah?
Yes.
This is brilliant.
Yes. There's also an image of a very old woman, and it also turns into a very young woman if you look at it differently.
Oh, yes, yes. But the thing is with this woman, the young woman or the older woman, I can only see one at a time. I can't see both. With this illusion, I can see both. Somehow I can perceive it at the same time. It feels like I can perceive it at the same time.
Yes, yes.
So he says, duality has the power to reunite seeming opposites like mind matter. Yeah, mind matter. Opposites. Self other. Form formlessness. Indeed, in duality, mind and matter are two aspects of the same thing, i.e., consciousness. Oh, wow.
So we all live in a subjective reality.
Yes. In a subjective reality, and it feels objective, okay? And they're all both one. Duality, both merge into one. She says here, reality is entirely non-dual. Duality is an emergent property reliant on an underlying unity. There's a unity everywhere. Okay. Then she talks about non-ordinary experiences. Okay, here, just before we go this to the non-ordinary experiences, again, she talks about the duality. Serves to probe our existential queries, and yet evades irrefutable verification. So finding hard evidence is challenging. There are a lot of philosophies, because she also mentioned there's like 95% of our universe, like, you know, string theory and black holes, we don't, they are undiscovered. There's so much we don't know. So it is very difficult to verify. We can propose hypotheses, I guess. Yeah. But it seems to kind of make sense on a level. This kind of this concept of duality and non-duality. Oh yeah, there's this. It says here, non-ordinary experiences in this section. 95% of the known cosmos is composed of dark matter and dark energy, realms we scarcely comprehend. Yeah. And there is a lot of ambiguity. So common examples of non-ordinary experiences include hearing voices, seeing presences or apparitions, communicating with non-incarnated entities, channeling, transpersonal experiences, out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, past life experiences, presentiements, and precognitions, and remote viewing. Cultural, religious, and personal factors shape whether these experiences are interpreted as spiritual revelations or psychological distress. Yes, because it says here somewhere, I'm not sure where, but you know, if someone has a psychosis in a different culture, they would be more accepted and more normalized, and they wouldn't, you know, they would feel like they fit in. But someone having psychosis in a Western culture where so like left-brained, logical, this kind of culture would want to have a logical explanation for everything, they would be a little bit like an outcast. I'm guessing maybe medicated. But if someone was talking about channeling and having near-death experiences and past life experiences in a different culture, they would be so very like accepted.
You're either a shaman or you are a schizophrenic, depending on which culture you live in.
Oh wow, that's wise. I never heard that. Where did you hear that, Marlene? That's brilliant.
I'm just noticing it where she talks about,
Yeah.
let's see, Isabel Clarke's perspective suggests that these strange experiences, these unusual experiences, could arise from brain division between the, like what you said, Vana, between the rational and verbal left hemisphere, which is dominant in our culture, which operates on either or logic, and then the intuitive and symbolic right hemisphere, which functions on both and logic. And so we don't include the right hemisphere. You know, we tend to not give it value because it's so fluid and more artistic, and it's just different. But we need both. We need left and right brain.
And let's move on. Archetypes. Okay, and that's the final part of the section of the book, the archetypes. We actually are living archetypes much more than we are living human beings. Oh my God. And she goes through a list of common archetypes. I recognize a lot in myself, probably all of them that she mentioned there. The hero, the courageous, I've got a courageous part, I've got the sage part. That confused me, the sage part, because I thought the sage part is the self. The self is very wise. But I guess I could also have a part as a sage. The pursuing truth and knowledge. The artist, the leader, the explorer, the caregiver, the rebel, the lover, the jester, the mystic, seeking spiritual truths, the warrior. And then she goes through a beautiful, wonderful exercise. She does have the most amazing exercises in this book. The first two chapters, the exercises are absolutely wonderful. And we have gone through the exercises before we started recording. And that's the end of the book. I love the common archetypes. I do find them in myself. I don't know. Do you find them, Marlene, in yourself? Have you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. The rebel definitely is a pretty prominent one that I have. And then also a caretaker or a caregiver.
Yes.
So there's a soft part and a harder part, like a warrior part.
I did
the rebel's
talk about
a fighter.
Yeah, I have a question here about the mystic, because I'm knowing IFS, I'm becoming a little bit more of a mystic. I have a very strong logical part that didn't want to give a lot of space for anything mystical. But I'm appreciating the mystic a little bit more now.
True, it's like a development.
Yes, I had exiled that part.
Right, it
Yeah.
was.
So understanding what kind of archetypes exist within our system and making friends with them and knowing how they can be our allies or how we can help them, it's quite wonderful. And the exercise, the archetypes of your life, is brilliant. She does have three levels. 4 levels. So the top level, personal life, how we interact with others, the archetypes that interact with others, and then the ground level, level 2, the family lineage. Then we go into a lot of legacy archetypes. What kind of archetypes we have inherited from our father's side and our mother's side. Level 3 is the cultural identity, archetypes influenced by culture. And level 4 is the cave, the ancestral roots. Okay, guys. That's all for today. If anyone else has any comments, because I'll be closing our recording. I'll be ending our recording. And I think next week we'll do chapter 3. We'll discuss chapter 3. It's all about parts and self. It's going to be very interesting. So thank you for being here and interacting. And I will end the recording and we can continue with the private conversation. If I can find it.